It was a night when the rain seemed endless, pouring down in heavy sheets that blurred the glow of the streetlights and turned the roads into shimmering rivers. Jacob, a 34-year-old single father, was exhausted after his long shift at the warehouse. His hands still aching from the day's work. He just wanted to get home, change into something warm, and check on his little daughter Lily, who would be asleep by now. But as he slowed at a junction, his eyes caught sight of something that made him ease off the gas. Under a flickering street lamp, sitting on a worn-out wooden bench, was a young girl. Her hair clung to her face, wet from the relentless rain, and her small backpack was pulled tightly against her chest as if it were the only thing she owned in the world. She looked cold, lost, and painfully out of place. Jacob rolled down his window and called out gently, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl's head lifted slowly and he saw her eyes tired, glassy and wary. She hesitated before speaking, as though unsure if answering him would make things better or worse. "I don't have anywhere to go," she finally said, her voice thin and trembling. She told him her name was Emily and that she was 18, but the way she said it carried the weight of someone who had been forced to grow up too fast. Jacob could feel the father in him react instantly. He knew what it was like to feel stranded and desperate. He'd been there once, years ago, before Lily was born, before life had taught him that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. He studied her for a moment, the rain dripping off her coat, her shoulders hunched against the cold. There was something fragile about her, but also something stubborn in the way she stayed rooted to that bench. A car drove past, splashing water over the curb, but she didn't even flinch. Jacob leaned a little closer out of his window and said, "Listen, I'm not here to hurt you. I can't drive away knowing you're sitting out here in this weather. My place is nearby. You can stay the night, just until you figure out what to do." Emily's eyes widened slightly, suspicion flickering in them. He understood. In her position, trust was a luxury. She glanced away, chewing on her lip, the decision clearly weighing on her. The rain was soaking through her clothes, and her fingers were turning red from the cold. Finally, she gave the smallest nod, clutching her backpack tighter as she stood. She climbed into the passenger seat slowly, her posture tense, as if ready to bolt at the first wrong move. The car was warm, the faint smell of coffee lingering from Jacob's thermos earlier that day. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, the sound of the rain filling the space between them. Jacob didn't pry. He didn't ask why she was out there or what had happened. Instead, he tried to make her feel at ease, pointing out the street they were on, the little grocery store he often took Lily to, the park where his daughter liked to chase pigeons. Emily nodded politely but kept her gaze on the window, her reflection looking as guarded as her words. When they reached his apartment, Jacob parked and led her upstairs. The building was modest but clean, the hallway dimly lit. He unlocked the door, and the moment they stepped inside, a wave of warm air wrapped around them. Emily hesitated at the threshold, her shoes dripping water onto the welcome mat. "It's okay," Jacob said softly. "You can come in." He grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her, then rummaged through a closet to find some dry clothes. His daughter's old clothes were too small, so he pulled out one of his oversized sweatshirts and a pair of clean pajama pants. "They're big, but at least they're dry," he said with a small smile. Emily took them, murmuring a quiet thank you before disappearing into the bathroom to change. When she came out, her hair damp but no longer dripping, she looked a little less like someone bracing against the world and a little more like someone who had been allowed a moment to rest. Jacob handed her a mug of hot tea and gestured toward the couch. Lily's room was closed, the sound machine inside humming softly, keeping her in dreamland. Jacob sat in the armchair across from Emily, keeping his tone casual. She didn't offer much about herself, just that she'd been staying with a friend whose family had made it clear she wasn't welcome anymore. Jacob didn't push. Trust was something you earned slowly, and tonight wasn't about solving her problems. It was about giving her a safe place to breathe. He set up the couch with fresh blankets and a pillow, showing her how to lock the door from the ends if she felt uncomfortable. She gave a faint smile, the kind that carried both gratitude and exhaustion, before curling up under the covers. Jacob switched off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp near the window. He lingered for a moment, watching the rain slide down the glass outside. Part of him wondered if inviting a stranger into his home was a mistake, but another part knew he couldn't have lived with himself if he'd just driven away. As he finally settled into bed, he couldn't shake the image of her sitting alone on that bench in the rain. Something told him this was only the beginning of a story neither of them had expected. Emily awoke to the faint aroma of coffee and the soft clinking of dishes in the kitchen. The rain from the night before had stopped, and pale morning light was slipping through the blinds, casting quiet stripes across the living room. For a moment she didn't remember where she was, but then the events of the night replayed in her mind. The bench, the cold, Jacob's voice offering her shelter. She sat up slowly, feeling the warmth of the blanket around her, and noticed a small folded note on the coffee table. "Made breakfast. Take your time." The handwriting was neat, steady, the kind of writing that hinted at a person who didn't rush things unless necessary. She padded toward the kitchen, her bare feet sinking slightly into the carpet, and found Jacob pouring coffee into 2 mugs. His hair was still damp from a quick shower, and there was a weariness in his eyes, but his smile was genuine. "Morning," he greeted, sliding a plate toward her on the counter. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a few apple slices. It wasn't much, but it was warm and carefully prepared. Emily hesitated, unused to such thoughtfulness, before muttering a soft thank you and taking a seat. Jacob didn't crowd her with questions. Instead, he asked if she slept well, if she liked the tea from last night, if she wanted the TV on while she ate. His manner was gentle but steady, and little by little the knot of tension in her shoulders began to loosen. It was then that Lily wandered in, rubbing her eyes and dragging a blanket behind her. She froze when she saw Emily, her wide brown eyes studying the unfamiliar face. "Hi," Lily said cautiously. Emily smiled shyly and waved, unsure how much Jacob had told his daughter about her. Jacob crouched next to Lily and explained simply, "This is Emily. She's our guest for a little while." Lily nodded in acceptance, the way children often did when they sensed they didn't need all the details to understand kindness. The morning passed slowly, but comfortably. Emily offered to wash the dishes, and though Jacob refused at first, she insisted, saying it was the least she could do. He let her, noticing how carefully she handled each plate, almost as if she were afraid of breaking something precious. Afterward, she wandered into the living room where Lily was sitting on the floor surrounded by colored pencils and half-finished drawings. Lily showed her a picture of a big, bright sun with stick-figure people holding hands underneath it. Emily crouched down beside her, complimenting the drawing, and soon found herself with a sheet of paper and a pencil in her own hands. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she was doing something simple, something that didn't require her to defend herself or keep moving. Jacob watched them from the doorway, noticing how Emily's face softened when she laughed at something Lily said. He could tell there was a sadness behind her smile, a kind of grief or worry she was trying to hide, but he didn't press her to share it. He'd learned long ago that trust wasn't built by prying, it was built by showing up consistently without strings attached. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the air turned cooler, Jacob asked if she wanted to join him and Lily for dinner. He made pasta with garlic bread, the kind of meal that filled the apartment with a comforting aroma. Over the meal, Emily began to talk, just small things at first. She mentioned a school she used to attend, way she liked drawing more than anything else, how she missed her mother's cooking. Jacob listened carefully, nodding and asking the occasional question, but never pushing when she paused for too long. When it was time for bed, Jacob once again set up the couch with clean blankets. This time, Emily didn't look so uncertain about staying. She even accepted a small cup of tea before lying down, holding the warm mug between her hands as though it was an anchor. Before turning in for the night, Jacob reminded her that the bathroom light was always left on in case she needed to find her way in the dark. She gave him a quiet smile, the kind that carried both gratitude and the beginnings of trust. In the stillness after the apartment went dark, Emily lay awake for a while, staring at the faint pattern of light spilling from under the bathroom door. She thought about the previous night, the cold rain, the empty streets, the fear that had wrapped itself around her like a second skin, and now she was here. Not home, not entirely safe in the way she longed to be, but better, warmer, not alone. It was fragile, this new sense of safety, but for now it was enough. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the ticking clock in the living room lull her towards sleep, unaware that the walls she had built around her heart had already begun to crack. The next few days passed with an ease Emily hadn't felt in a long time. The apartment was small, but it felt alive in a way that made her chest ache with something unfamiliar, something dangerously close to comfort. She helped Jacob with dishes, folded laundry with Lily, and even joined them for a walk to the corner store where Lily insisted on picking out a chocolate bar for her. Emily found herself smiling more often, though she tried not to think too hard about it. Smiles could be dangerous. They could make you forget how quickly things could fall apart. It was on the 4th evening, just as the 3 of them were clearing away the dinner plates, that the knock came. It wasn't a casual knock. It was hard, sharp and deliberate, the kind of sound that made the air in the room change. Emily froze in place, the plate in her hands slipping slightly before she caught it. Jacob noticed immediately. Her eyes were wide, her skin pale, her breath shallow. Before he could ask, another knock came, louder this time, followed by a deep male voice calling out, "Emily, I know you're in there." The plate clattered into the sink, and she stumbled backward, her hands trembling. "It's him," she whispered, so quietly that Jacob almost didn't hear. His brows furrowed. "Who?" But before she could answer, the man's voice thundered again, this time laced with anger. "You can't hide from me forever." Jacob's instinct kicked in instantly. He turned to Lily, who was standing frozen near the table, her little face confused and afraid. "Sweetheart, go to your room," he said in a calm but firm tone. Lily didn't argue. She hurried down the hall, closing her door softly behind her. Jacob stepped closer to Emily. "Tell me," he said quietly, his voice low and steady despite the pounding on the door. Her breath hitched as she finally spoke, the words spilling out in a rush. "My stepfather, I left. I couldn't stay there anymore. After my mom died, he tried to control everything, where I went, who I talked to, and when I pushed back he got angry. He told me I'd never make it on my own, that I'd come crawling back. I left with nothing, just my backpack. I didn't think he'd find me." Another slam shook the door. Jacob's jaw tightened. He could see the fear in her eyes, real raw fear, and it lit a protective fire in him he hadn't felt since the day Lily was born. "You're safe here," he told her firmly, meeting her gaze so she would believe him. "I'm not letting him in. Be safe here," he told her firmly, meeting her gaze so she would believe him. "I'm not letting him in." Jacob moved to the door but didn't open it. "You need to leave," he called out sharply. "She doesn't want to see you." The man on the other side laughed a cold, ugly sound and cursed under his breath before pounding again. Jacob didn't waste any more time. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed the police, giving the address and explaining the situation with calm efficiency. Emily stood frozen behind him, clutching her backpack like it was a shield, her breathing ragged. The minutes between the call and the sound of sirens were long and tense. The man kept yelling, alternating between threats and false sweetness, trying to coax her out. Emily shook her head every time his voice softened, as if she knew exactly what would follow that false charm. Jacob stayed between her and the door, a silent wall of protection. When the flashing lights finally illuminated the window, the pounding stopped. Voices from outside, firm, authoritative, ordered the man to step away. Jacob stayed still until he heard the footsteps retreat and the sound of a car door closing. Only then did he exhale, his shoulders dropping slightly. Emily's legs gave out and she sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. She was shaking, but whether from fear or relief, Jacob couldn't tell. He sat on the coffee table in front of her, leaning forward. "He's gone for now. The police will handle it. You don't have to face him alone anymore." She looked up, eyes red but focused on him. "You don't even know me. Why are you doing this?" Jacob met her gaze without hesitation. "Because no one should have to face that kind of fear alone. Not you. Not anyone." Somewhere down the hall, Lily's small voice called softly, "Daddy." Jacob turned and reassured her through the closed door that everything was okay now. But inside he knew this was far from over. Emily's past had found her doorstep, and protecting her might be more complicated than simply locking the door. Still, as he looked back at her trembling form, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her go back to that life, no matter what it took. The flashing lights faded from the street outside, leaving the apartment in a heavy, echoing silence. Jacob stood by the window for a moment longer, watching the police car pull away with the man in the back seat. Emily sat curled on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, gripping the blanket Jacob had draped over her. Her eyes followed the movement of the shadows on the wall, as if expecting them to suddenly shift back into danger. Jacob crossed the room and sat across from her, leaning his elbows on his knees. His voice was steady, but softer now. "They'll keep him away. The officers will help file the paperwork for a restraining order first thing in the morning." Emily nodded, though her expression told him that years of fear wouldn't dissolve in a single conversation. She was quiet for a long while, the only sounds in the apartment being Lily's faint humming from her room and the low ticking of the clock on the wall. When she finally spoke, her voice was fragile. "I don't know where to go next." "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," Jacob replied. "One step at a time." He explained that there were shelters and transitional programs for young adults like her, and that he could help her contact the right people. The mention of shelters made her stiffen slightly, but when Jacob assured her she wouldn't be abandoned in the process, she seemed to relax a little. Over the next week, Emily began meeting with a social worker Jacob had arranged through a local outreach center. They discussed options for safe housing, job programs and even vocational training. In between those appointments, she helped around the apartment, sharing small moments with Lily, coloring books at the kitchen table, helping with homework, even baking cookies one rainy afternoon. Jacob noticed how Emily laughed more openly now, though there were still moments when her eyes would go distant, as if pulled back into memories she couldn't quite escape. One afternoon she came back from a meeting with the social worker holding a small folder of papers. Her voice was both nervous and proud when she told Jacob she'd been accepted into a shared apartment program for young women starting over. "It's not forever," she said quickly, as if she needed to defend the choice, "but it's a place." Jacob smiled, feeling a quiet pride for her. "It's more than a place, Emily. It's yours." The night before she was set to move in, she lingered in the living room after Lily had gone to bed. She stood by the window looking out at the quiet street, her hands resting loosely at her sides. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't just give me a couch to sleep on. You made me feel safe. I haven't felt that in years. Jacob didn't respond right away, letting the weight of her words settle. Finally he said, you don't have to thank me. You did the hard part. You walked away from something that was hurting you. I just opened the door. The next morning they helped her pack her small backpack and a few new things she'd collected during her stay. An extra sweater, a notebook and a small framed drawing Lily had made of the three of them standing under a bright yellow sun. Emily hugged Lily first, kneeling to meet her eyes. You keep drawing those suns, okay? She said, smiling through the wetness in her eyes. Then she turned to Jacob. The hug they shared was quiet but strong, the kind of embrace that carried more meaning than words ever could. As Jacob watched her walk down the sidewalk toward the waiting car from the outreach program, he felt a mix of pride and a strange ache in his chest. She turned once, waving with that new fragile but determined smile, and then she was gone. The apartment felt a little emptier that afternoon, but Jacob knew this was the right ending to the chapter they had shared. Emily's life ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be challenges, fears, and days when the past tried to pull her back. But she had taken the first step into a future she had chosen for herself, and Jacob knew that mattered more than anything. Sometimes he thought, the most important thing you can give someone isn't advice, money or a plan. It's the space and safety to believe in themselves again. And in giving that to Emily, he realized she had given something back to him too. A reminder that even in a world full of storms, you can be someone's shelter if only for a while.